The darkness of space held many secrets, but none were as terrible as the Krell. Their massive warship, the Ravager's Triumph, hung in orbit above a dying world. Below, the last cities of the Thessaran people burned. Smoke rose into the atmosphere in thick columns that could be seen from space. Huntmaster Vexthor stood in the trophy hall of his ship. The chamber stretched for hundreds of meters, filled with artifacts from conquered species. Glass cases lined the walls, each one containing the final remnants of a civilization that no longer existed. A ceremonial crown from the Velthani, a prayer stone from the Korath monks, a child's toy from a species whose name had been forgotten, 200 cases, 200 dead species, 200 successful hunts. Vexthor's scaled hand traced the edge of the newest case. Inside lay a Thessaran musical instrument, its strings still vibrating with the last song ever played by its people. The Krell believed in a simple truth that governed the universe. The strong survived, the weak died. There was no room for mercy or hesitation. The galaxy belonged to those who could take it and hold it. The Thessarans had been easy prey. They built beautiful cities and created magnificent art. They wrote poetry and studied the stars with wonder, but they could not fight. When the Krell arrived, the Thessarans tried to negotiate. They offered friendship and knowledge. They believed that intelligent species could live in peace. They were wrong. Within 3 months, their civilization was ash and memory. A junior hunter approached, his armor still scorched from the final assault on the last Thessaran city. He bowed low before speaking. "Huntmaster, the scouts have returned from the Outer Rim. They found a new world." Vexthor turned, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Tell me about this world." The young Krell activated a holographic display. A blue and green planet appeared, rotating slowly in the air between them. White clouds swirled across its surface. Oceans covered most of the sphere. The inhabitants call it Earth. A single dominant species controls the planet. They call themselves humans. They have recently developed basic spaceflight. Vexthor studied the image. What are their capabilities? Limited, Huntmaster. They have no plasma weapons, no energy shields, no faster-than-light travel yet. Their ships barely reach their own moon. The scout pulled up biological data. The species itself is weak. No natural armor, no claws or fangs, poor sensory systems compared to most predators. They cannot even see in darkness without tools. Another Krell laughed from across the chamber. They sound like the Thessarans, artists and dreamers. This hunt will be over before it begins. Vexthor nodded slowly. How many humans are there? Approximately 8 billion. Spread across all the continents of their world. They are divided into hundreds of nations, constantly fighting among themselves. They have not achieved unity. Even better. Vexthor closed his clawed hand into a fist. A divided prey is easy prey. Begin the isolation protocol. I want all their communications jammed. Destroy their orbital stations. Cut them off from any chance of calling for help, not that anyone would answer. Yes, Huntmaster. When do we begin the hunt? Vexthor looked at the newest trophy case, then back at the image of Earth. Immediately. This will be our 201st extinction. Perhaps these humans will provide better sport than the Thessarans. Perhaps they will fight. It matters little. The result will be the same. Ready the hunting parties. We descend at dawn. Far across the galaxy, on the blue world the Krell had marked for death, humanity went about its daily life with no idea of what was coming. In Geneva, scientists celebrated a successful test of a new telescope array. In Tokyo, engineers worked on designs for a permanent lunar base. In New York, diplomats argued about trade agreements. In Lagos, children played in streets while their parents worked. Ordinary life on an ordinary day. Commander James Rodriguez sat in the International Space Defense Force headquarters, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago. His shift monitoring Earth's orbital traffic was almost over. Satellites blinked across his screens in predictable patterns. The space station sent its regular check-in signal. Everything was normal. Everything was quiet. Then everything changed. The screens went white with static. Every satellite feed died at once. Rodriguez dropped his coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, forgotten. What just happened? Get those feeds back online. His team worked frantically at their stations. All satellites are offline, sir. Not damaged, just offline. It's like something is jamming everything. The space station? A terrible silence filled the room. Rodriguez knew what it meant before anyone spoke. No signal, sir. They're gone. Get me the Secretary General. Get me the military chiefs. Get me everyone. Rodriguez stared at his blank screens. In 30 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. Something is up there. And whatever it is, it just blinded us. The Krell dropships entered Earth's atmosphere over 6 continents simultaneously. They were designed to be invisible to primitive sensors, and they succeeded. No radar detected them. No satellites tracked them. They fell through the clouds like silent meteors, burning away the air as they descended. The first ship landed in the Amazon rainforest. Its doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air. 12 Krell hunters emerged, their armor gleaming in the filtered sunlight. They carried weapons that could burn through steel. They wore helmets that showed them heat signatures and tracked movement. They had hunted on 200 worlds. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. Their leader, a veteran hunter named Kresh, activated his scanner. Immediately, dozens of heat signatures appeared throughout the jungle. Animals fled from the landing site. Birds took flight in panicked flocks, and in the distance, approximately 3 kilometers away, a small human settlement showed on his display. There, Kresh pointed with his plasma rifle. 27 humans. We will test their mettle. Remember the code. Give them a chance to run. Let them feel hope. Then take your trophies. The hunt begins. The Krell moved through the jungle with practiced efficiency. They had done this thousands of times. They knew how prey behaved. Fear would make the humans clumsy. Panic would make them visible. The hunt would be over quickly. Other ships landed in different locations. The Himalayan mountains, the Australian outback, the forests of Canada, the plains of Africa, isolated places where humans lived in small groups far from help. The Krell had learned that starting with outlying populations was effective. The fear would spread. The stories would terrify. And by the time the major cities realized what was happening, the Krell would already control the planet's orbit. Bexthor remained on his flagship, watching the hunt begin through the helmet cameras of his warriors. He saw the first human village through Kresh's eyes. Simple wooden buildings, dirt paths, children playing, adults working. They had no idea that death walked toward them through the trees. Let the 201st extinction begin, Bexthor said. This world will fall like all the others. He was wrong. But he would not realize his mistake until it was far too late. The Krell had hunted prey on 200 worlds. But they had never hunted anything like humanity. They had never faced a species that evolved as persistence predators. They had never encountered a race that simply refused to die no matter how badly the odds were stacked against them. The hunt was beginning, but the question of who was the hunter and who was the prey was about to become very unclear. The village of San Gabriel in the Amazon had 53 people. They lived simple lives, far from the noise and chaos of big cities. They fished in the river. They grew crops in small gardens. They knew the jungle and respected it. They understood that the forest had predators, and they knew how to avoid them. But nothing prepared them for the Krell. Maria Santos was hanging laundry when the screaming started. She dropped the wet shirt in her hands and ran toward the sound. Her neighbor, old Miguel, stood in the middle of the village square pointing at the jungle. His hand shook. His face had gone white. Monsters, he whispered.
Monsters in the trees. Then the Krell emerged from the jungle wall.
12 figures, each standing over 2 meters tall, covered in armor that seemed to absorb the light. Their helmets had no faces, just dark visors that reflected the terrified villagers. They moved with the confidence of creatures that had never known defeat. Kresh raised his plasma rifle and fired a single shot into the air. A tree exploded into flames. The message was clear: run. The villagers ran. They scattered in every direction, instinct overriding thought. Mothers grabbed children. Men shouted warnings. The Krell followed at a walking pace. There was no hurry. The prey always ran. The prey always died. But something unexpected happened. 3 of the villagers did not run far. They were hunters themselves, men who tracked jaguar and knew the jungle better than they knew their own homes. They watched the Krell from hiding, and they saw something important. The aliens followed heat signatures. Their helmets tracked movement, but they moved in straight lines. They did not anticipate. They did not adapt. One hunter named Carlos whispered to his companions, "They hunt like tourists, like city people who come here and think the jungle is a petting zoo. Watch." Carlos threw a stone far to the left. The nearest Krell turned instantly. tracking the heat of Carlos's hand that had warmed the stone. In that moment of distraction, the three hunters melted into the jungle using paths only they knew. They doubled back. They moved through water to hide their heat. They climbed trees and waited. The Krell found 20 villagers that day. 20 people who could not hide, who did not know the jungle well enough, who panicked and ran in straight lines. The Krell took their trophies and returned to their ship, satisfied. It had been a successful hunt. Easy prey as expected, but 33 villagers survived. And 3 of them had learned something valuable. The aliens could be fooled. Similar scenes played out across the world. In the Himalayas, a climbing expedition vanished. In Australia, an outback research station went silent. In Canada, a logging camp was found empty. Equipment still running, meals half-eaten. The pattern was clear. Something was hunting humans in remote locations. Colonel Sarah Chen saw the pattern before most people. She worked in military intelligence at the Pentagon, analyzing threats. When the reports started coming in, she put them together on a map. 17 incidents in 3 days, all in isolated locations, all with the same description from the few survivors. Tall armored figures, advanced weapons, hunting parties. She brought her analysis to General Marcus Webb. He stared at her report for a long time before speaking. "You're saying we're being invaded." "Not invaded, sir, hunted. There's a difference. An invasion takes territory. These things are selecting isolated targets. They're testing us. What do they want?" Sarah met his eyes. "I think they want us extinct, sir." The general activated emergency protocols. Military forces around the world went on high alert. But when they finally confronted the Krell, they learned a hard lesson. Conventional weapons barely worked. Bullets bounced off the Krell armor. Explosives damaged them but rarely killed them. And the Krell weapons cut through tanks like paper. The first major engagement happened near Denver. A Krell hunting party of 20 attacked a small town. The military responded with 200 soldiers, helicopter support and armor. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Krell killed 78 soldiers before withdrawing, but they left behind 3 bodies. Sarah Chen was on the first helicopter to the battlefield. She knelt beside a dead Krell and studied it carefully. The armor was damaged but intact. She could see the seams, the power connections, the way the helmet interfaced with the suit. She photographed everything. She took samples. She needed to understand what they were fighting. Back in her lab, she and a team of scientists worked around the clock. They discovered several important things. The Krell armor was powered by a reactor in the back. It was vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses. The helmets relied on specific sensor frequencies, and the weapons could be overloaded if hit with enough electrical current. But the most important discovery came from studying the Krell itself. Its body was strong but not superhuman. Its reaction time was fast but not impossible. It had evolved as a predator, but on a world with less gravity than Earth. That meant in Earth's gravity they were slightly slower than they should be. Slightly more clumsy. "They're used to easy prey," Sarah told General Webb. "They've been doing this for a long time and they've gotten predictable. They follow patterns, honor codes. They give prey a chance to run, because that makes the hunt more satisfying. That's their weakness. They think this is a game, and we don't. No, sir. This is survival. And humans are very, very good at surviving." Sarah requested command of a special unit. She handpicked soldiers from different backgrounds, mountain climbers who knew how to survive in harsh terrain, marathon runners who could outlast any pursuit, hunters who understood predator psychology, engineers who could adapt technology on the fly. She did not want the best warriors. She wanted the best survivors. They called themselves the Persistence Unit, named after the way early humans hunted on the African savanna. Ancient humans were not fast or strong, but they could run forever. They would chase prey for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Sarah planned to do the same to the Krell. The first test came in Montana. A Krell hunting party of 8 was tracking refugees through the mountains. Sarah's team intercepted them, but instead of fighting directly, they led the Krell on a chase. Through valleys, over ridges, through rivers. The Krell followed, confident in their superior technology. But after 6 hours of pursuit, the Krell were tired. Their armor's power supplies were draining. They were dehydrated. They had not expected prey to run this long. When they finally stopped to rest, Sarah's team attacked from all sides. Electromagnetic pulses disabled their shields. Concentrated fire on their reactor packs caused overloads. In 15 minutes, all 8 Krell were dead. Sarah's team had 0 casualties. The tactic was shared globally. Other units adopted similar strategies. Instead of fighting the Krell directly, humans used the terrain. They used exhaustion. They used surprise. They learned to predict where the Krell would hunt and set traps. They started winning. In the Amazon, Carlos and his fellow survivors became legendary. They rescued other villagers. They destroyed 2 Krell ships using homemade explosives placed on vulnerable cooling systems. They taught other groups how to hide from Krell sensors using mud and water and constant movement. 3 weeks after the first landing, humanity had learned how to fight back. The Krell were still winning battles. They still had superior technology and numbers, but they were no longer winning every encounter. And for the first time in their long history of hunting, the Krell experienced something new. Doubt. On the Ravager's triumph, Vexthor reviewed the casualty reports with growing frustration. 67 hunters lost in 3 weeks. That was more than the entire Thessaran campaign. And the humans were adapting faster than any species he had encountered. They studied. They learned. They shared information instantly across their global networks. Perhaps we underestimated them, his second-in-command suggested carefully. Vexthor's clawed hand crushed the datapad. They are prey, weak soft prey. We will simply commit more resources. Send word to the fleet. We need reinforcements. This hunt is taking longer than anticipated, but the result will be the same. It must be. But in his private chambers that night, Vexthor looked at his trophy cases and felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. The humans were different. They did not simply run and die. They fought with a desperation and creativity that was unsettling. They used tactics that the Krell Code of Honor would never allow. They were not playing by the rules. And slowly a terrible thought formed in Vexthor's mind. Perhaps the rules themselves were the problem. 6 months had passed since the first Krell ship landed on Earth. The world had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The old borders between nations meant nothing now. There was only one enemy, and it wore armor and hunted humans for sport. The survivors had learned to fight together or die alone. Sarah Chen stood in what used to be a shopping mall in Colorado. Now it served as a military command center. The stores were gone, replaced by communications equipment, weapons manufacturing, and planning rooms. Humanity had adapted. They always did. On the wall behind her, a map showed Krell activity across the globe. Red dots marked their hunting grounds. Blue dots showed human victories. For the first time, there were more blue dots than red. A young engineer named David Kim approached her with a tablet. His eyes were bright with excitement. "Colonel, we've finished the analysis on the captured Krell fighter. We can fly it. More than that, we can copy it. The propulsion system is actually simpler than we thought. They've been using the same technology for so long that they never innovated. We can build our own versions." Sarah took the tablet and studied the schematics. "How long until we have a prototype?" 2 weeks if we push hard. A month for full production." David hesitated. "But there's something else. We broke their communication encryption. We've been listening to their broadcasts." Sarah's expression sharpened. "And? They're not just hunting us, Colonel. They've done this before. Many times. We found references to over 200 other species, all extinct. The Krell have been doing this for thousands of years." David pulled up a star map showing Krell territory. Hundreds of worlds were marked with symbols that likely meant conquest. But here's the interesting part. Some of those worlds show signs of recent activity. Not Krell activity. Someone else. Survivors. Exactly. They're hiding, scattered across dead worlds and remote systems. But they're still out there. The Krell didn't kill everyone. Just enough to break each civilization. Sarah stared at the map for a long time. An idea was forming, audacious and dangerous. "Get me General Webb, and start preparing a message for broadcast on all Krell frequencies. If there are survivors out there, they need to know something. They need to know humans don't hide." The war had evolved beyond simple survival. Humanity had reverse-engineered enough Krell technology to fight back effectively. They built their own plasma weapons. They created armor using Krell materials combined with Earth alloys, making suits that were lighter and more flexible. They learned to hack Krell systems and turn the aliens' own technology against them. But the real change was psychological. The Krell hunted according to codes of honor. They announced their presence. They gave prey a chance to run. They fought in specific ways that they considered proper. Humans followed no such code. They poisoned Krell water supplies. They hacked Krell ships and vented atmosphere while the crews slept. They used biological weapons designed specifically for Krell physiology. They broadcast psychological warfare on Krell communication channels, showing videos of dead hunters and destroyed ships. The Krell called these tactics dishonorable. Humans called them effective. The turning point came in Earth's orbit. The Krell maintained 3 warships above the planet, controlling access to space and preventing any human escape. They had done this on 200 worlds before. It always worked. Cut off the prey and they cannot call for help.
Cannot flee.
Cannot do anything but die. But humans had been building in secret. Using captured technology and raw human ingenuity, they constructed fighters in underground facilities. Not elegant ships. Not beautiful designs. They were ugly functional machines that barely held together. But they flew, and they carried weapons powerful enough to hurt Krell warships. Commander Rodriguez, the same man who had been on duty when the Krell first arrived, now led the first human strike wing. 50 fighters, most of them piloted by volunteers who had never flown in space before. They launched from hidden bases scattered across continents, timing their ascent to arrive simultaneously. The Krell detected them immediately. 3 human fighters were destroyed in the first minutes of engagement, but the remaining 47 did not fight like the Krell expected. They did not follow patterns. They used suicide runs. They rammed shields at full speed, overloading them. They targeted life support instead of weapons. They fought without honor, without mercy, without any consideration for their own survival. Rodriguez flew his fighter straight into the bridge of the lead Krell warship. His last words were transmitted to every human receiver on Earth. This is for the space station crew. This is for every person they hunted. This is for Earth. The explosion crippled the warship. The other 2 Krell vessels tried to retreat, but more human fighters pursued. The battle lasted 3 hours. By the end, all 3 Krell warships were destroyed. 39 human pilots died, but Earth's orbit was free. Sarah Chen watched the battle from the ground. When the last Krell ship exploded, she allowed herself a moment of grief for the lost pilots. Then she returned to work. There was no time to celebrate. This was just one battle. The war was far from over. She stood before the communication array and activated the broad-spectrum broadcast that David had prepared. Her message would be sent on every Krell frequency, encoded in their own language using their own systems, and it would reach far beyond just the Krell. It would reach anyone listening in the dark between the stars. This is Colonel Sarah Chen of Earth. We are humanity. 6 months ago, the Krell came to our world to hunt us. They expected us to die like the 200 species they exterminated before us. They were wrong. Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. We know about you. The survivors. The ones who hid when your worlds burned. We know you're out there, afraid and alone. We have a message for you. Stop hiding. Stop running. Join us. The Krell are not invincible. We've proven that. Together we can take back what they stole. Together we can make them understand what it means to be prey. The response came faster than Sarah expected. Within 48 hours, 3 separate transmissions arrived from different systems. The first was from a Thessaran rebel group, the same species the Krell had just conquered. They had 1 ship, barely functional, but they were alive and they wanted revenge. They sent detailed information about Krell military structures, supply lines, and weaknesses. The second response came from a species that called themselves the Chiracs. They were insect-like creatures who had survived by living in the toxic atmospheres of gas giants, where the Krell could not follow. They had no weapons, but they had maintained their technology and their knowledge. They offered to share scientific advances that humanity had not yet discovered. The third message was different. It came from a species called the Lumini, crystalline beings who existed in ways humans barely understood. They had watched the Krell for centuries, too different to be hunted, too alien to be threatened. They had never interfered before, but they sent coordinates. Coordinates to every Krell supply depot, every staging world, every communication relay. They sent the blueprint for destroying the Krell Empire. Within 2 months, the coalition had formed. Ships from a dozen species arrived at Earth, each bringing survivors who had waited years or decades for a chance to fight back. They were not warriors. Most of them were refugees, scientists, civilians who had lost everything. But they were tired of hiding. Sarah stood in the transformed mall and looked at the representatives of 4 species gathered around a holographic display. A Thessaran engineer, a Kirax scientist, a human pilot, a Lumine observer. The Krell think they're the apex predators of the galaxy, she said. They think the universe belongs to the strong. Let's teach them a different lesson. The universe belongs to those who refuse to give up. The strategy was simple. Hit the Krell where they were weakest. Their supply lines stretched across hundreds of light years. They were overextended, confident, lazy from millennia of easy victories. The coalition would use the same guerrilla tactics that worked on Earth. Strike fast, disappear, bleed them slowly. Make every hunt cost more than it was worth. But Sarah had a bigger goal. She studied the intelligence provided by the Lumini and found something interesting. The Krell had a staging world called Kreshvar, named after their greatest hunter. It was where they brought new warriors for training, where they stored their trophies, where their high command met to plan future hunts. It was heavily defended and considered untouchable. Sarah wanted to touch it. She wanted to burn it to ashes and make the Krell feel what every other species had felt. She wanted them to know terror. You're talking about an assault on their core territory, General Webb said when she presented the plan. We barely have a fleet. Most of our ships are held together with prayers and duct tape. Which is exactly why they won't expect it, Sarah replied. The Krell have been hunting for 3,000 years. No prey has ever counterattacked. They don't even have defenses designed for it. Their whole military doctrine is based on projecting force outward. What if someone came at them from the inside? Webb stared at the tactical display showing Kreshvar's defenses. It looked impossible. But 6 months ago, fighting the Krell at all had looked impossible. And now Earth controlled its own orbit. Now they had allies. Now they had hope. How many ships would you need? Sarah smiled. It was not a kind smile. All of them. The coalition fleet assembled in the dark space between star systems. 200 ships of various designs, sizes, and origins. Human vessels that still smelled of fresh welds and recycled air. Thessaran cruisers that had been hiding for months, their crews desperate for vengeance. Kirax bioships that looked more like living creatures than machines. And orbiting above them all, a Lumini construct that was less a ship and more a crystalline structure that bent light around itself. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship, a former Krell warship that humanity had captured and renamed Defiance. Around her, crew members from 4 species worked at stations, each bringing their unique perspective to the problems of warfare. A Thessaran navigator plotted courses using mathematical models that humans were still learning. A Kirax engineer monitored the engines with sensors that detected problems before they occurred. A young human named Marcus Webb, the general's son, coordinated communications between the diverse fleet. All ships reporting ready, Colonel, Marcus said. His hands moved across holographic controls with practiced ease. 6 months of war had turned teenagers into veterans. The Lumine confirmed that the Krell defense grid is operating on standard patterns. They don't suspect anything, Sarah nodded. Begin the operation. First strike teams move into position. The plan was complex because it had to be. Kreshvar was not just a military base. It was a symbol of Krell dominance, a world covered in monuments to their victories. The trophy halls there contained artifacts from all 200 extinct species. The training grounds had shaped 10,000 generations of hunters. The orbital fortresses had never been challenged, but the Krell had a weakness they did not recognize. They believed their own mythology. They thought they were invincible because they had always won. They had forgotten that winning because no one fought back was not the same as being unbeatable. The first wave was not an attack. It was a distraction. 20 human fighters, volunteers all, jumped into the system far from the planet. They broadcast on all Krell frequencies, taunting the defenders, daring them to give chase. The Krell responded exactly as predicted. Honor demanded they answer the challenge. Half of the orbital defense fleet broke formation and pursued. Those Krell ships chased the human fighters through an asteroid field. The humans knew the route. They had mapped every rock, every gravitational anomaly, every hiding spot. The Krell did not. 3 of their ships collided with asteroids at full speed. 5 more were ambushed by Kirax bioships that had been waiting, camouflaged against the space rocks. The remaining Krell vessels turned back toward Kreshvar, but by then it was too late. The main coalition fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel right on top of the planet. They came in fast and close, too close for the remaining orbital fortresses to fire without hitting the planet below. The Thessaran cruisers targeted the communication arrays first, cutting Kreshvar off from any reinforcements. The human ships launched boarding parties at the fortresses, and the Luminae construct did something that no one had expected. It began to sing. The sound was not audible in space, but every ship's computer registered it. A harmonic frequency that resonated with Krell technology, causing systems to malfunction. Weapons fired randomly. Shields flickered on and off. Entire stations went dark as their power systems overloaded from the interference. All boarding teams, you are clear to engage. Sarah broadcast. Remember the objective? We're not here to conquer. We're here to send a message. The fighting on the orbital fortresses was brutal. Krell warriors defended their positions with savage determination. But they were facing enemies who had learned to fight from a species that had survived every extinction event Earth had ever thrown at it. The boarding teams used the confined spaces to their advantage. They moved in small coordinated units. They used the Krell's honor codes against them, feinting challenges to draw warriors into traps. A human sergeant named Maria Santos led her squad through the corridors of Defense Station 3. She was the same Maria who had survived the first hunt in the Amazon, who had learned to track Krell through the jungle. Now she hunted them through their own base using skills passed down from her ancestors who had once tracked predators across the savannah. Contact ahead, her point man whispered. 3 Krell standard patrol formation. Maria smiled. Standard was predictable. Rodriguez, take the left corridor. Chen the right. I'll go straight. On my mark. She counted down silently, then moved. The Krell in the center turned to face her, raising his weapon. But by then Rodriguez had shot him from the left, and Chen had disabled his armor from the right. The warrior fell without firing a shot. Across the station similar scenes played out. The Krell were skilled warriors, perhaps the best in the galaxy in single combat. But they had never learned to fight as a coordinated force against enemies who were willing to use any tactic to win. They fought with honor. Humans fought to survive. Within 3 hours, all 6 orbital fortresses were under coalition control. The Krell on the planet's surface watched in disbelief as their supposedly impregnable defenses fell. Nothing like this had ever happened in their recorded history. Prey did not attack. Prey did not win. But here was undeniable proof that everything they believed was wrong. Sarah ordered the second phase. Landing teams, secure the trophy halls. Science teams, prepare for cultural archive. We're going to take everything they stole and give it back to the galaxy. The human marines who entered the great trophy hall of Kreshvar moved through it in silence. The chamber was massive, carved from the living rock of the planet. Thousands of cases lined the walls, stretching up hundreds of meters. Each one contained the last remnants of a dead civilization. Art, technology, simple toys, religious artifacts. The final proof that a species had existed before the Krell erased them. Lieutenant David Kim, the engineer who had helped crack Krell technology, stood before a case containing a Thessaran musical instrument. His hands shook as he carefully documented it. This belonged to someone, he said quietly. Someone who had a name, a family, dreams, and the Krell took it as a trophy. Like this was all a game. It was a game to them, Sarah said, standing beside him. But not anymore. Pack everything carefully. Every artifact gets returned to whatever survivors we can find. The Krell don't get to keep their trophies. While the artifact recovery proceeded, the Coalition sent a message to the planet's surface. Sarah's face appeared on every screen in every Krell city. She spoke in their language, using words they would understand. Krell warriors, you have hunted 200 species across 3,000 years. You took pride in your strength. You built monuments to your victories. You believed the universe belonged to the strong. Sarah paused, letting the words sink in. You were wrong. The universe belongs to those who survive. And now you are the ones being hunted. Feel what they felt. Know what they knew. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. We are coming for every one of your worlds. Every base. Every ship. And we will not stop until you understand what you have done. On the planet's surface, Huntmaster Vexthor watched the broadcast from the High Command Chamber. Around him, the greatest military minds of the Krell species tried to comprehend what had just happened. Their core world, their sacred training ground, their symbol of dominance had fallen in less than a day. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. It was real. We must respond, a general insisted. Send the Grand Armada. Crush them completely. That is exactly what they want, Vexthor said quietly. All eyes turned to him. I have fought these humans. I was the first to hunt them. I warned you they were different. They are not like the other species. They do not simply react. They plan, they adapt. This attack on Kreshavar is not about conquest. It is about making us commit our forces. Then what do we do? Vexthor looked at the tactical display showing the Coalition fleet in orbit. We do what prey does when cornered. We fight back with everything we have. But understand this. We are no longer the hunters. We are the hunted. And I do not know if we can win. The High Command overruled him. They sent word to recall the Grand Armada from its hunting grounds across the galaxy. Every Krell warship, every hunter, every resource would be directed at one goal, the complete annihilation of Earth and its coalition. They would show the galaxy what happened when prey dared to fight back. The Coalition fleet withdrew from Kreshavar, taking the artifacts and leaving behind a single message carved into the monument at the center of the trophy hall. No more extinctions. As they retreated into deep space, Sarah studied the intelligence reports. The Krell were recalling everything. The Grand Armada would be massive, outnumbering the Coalition fleet 10-1. It would be the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. We can't fight them head-on, General Webb said over the communication link from Earth. Those numbers are impossible. We don't need to fight them head-on, Sarah replied. We need to fight them the way humans have always fought impossible odds. We need to make the battlefield work for us. Start evacuating Earth. Get as many people off planet as possible. Scatter them across the systems our allies have secured. This next battle is going to decide everything. Where will you meet? The Veil Nebula was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. Clouds of ionized gas glowed in shades of purple and blue. Electromagnetic storms crackled between dense pockets of matter. Visibility was measured in meters, not kilometers. It was the worst possible place to fight a space battle with traditional tactics, which was exactly why Sarah Chen had chosen it. The Krell Grand Armada entered the nebula expecting a conventional engagement. They maintained their tight formations. They followed their standard battle protocols. They searched for the Coalition fleet using long-range sensors that barely functioned in the interference. They were hunting just as they always had, but this time, they were walking into an ambush set by a species that had learned warfare from 1,000,000 years of being both predator and prey. The first wave hit them from above and below simultaneously. Human fighters came screaming out of the gas clouds at full burn, launching everything they had, then disappearing back into the mist before the Krell could respond. The attacks were surgical, not trying to destroy ships, just damage sensors, disable weapons, create confusion. Chirac's bioships released clouds of organic material that clogged Krell air recyclers. Thesser and cruisers fired and relocated before return fire could reach them. The Krell tried to maintain formation, but the nebula was pulling them apart. Ships lost contact with each other. Commanders could not coordinate. The perfect military machine began to fracture into hundreds of individual vessels, each one fighting blind in the chaos. And then the Coalition struck with everything they had. Not all at once. Not in a grand battle. They picked off isolated ships one by one, using the terrain like guerrilla fighters in a jungle. 3 Coalition vessels would swarm a single Krell warship from different angles, overwhelm it, then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. It was not honorable. It was not fair. It was brutally effective. Sarah commanded from the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The display was incomplete, fragmentary, but it showed enough. Red icons blinked out one after another as Krell ships were destroyed or disabled. Target the command carriers, she ordered. Cut off their coordination and they become individual fighters. We can beat them one at a time. Lieutenant Maria Santos piloted one of the fighters in the chaos. Her squad had been together since the Amazon, all survivors of that first hunt. They knew each other's movements without words. They flew through the nebula like fish through coral, using every trick they had learned from months of fighting. Rodriguez was on her wing, his voice calm in her ear. 3 o'clock Krell destroyer looks isolated. I see it. Chen, flank left. Rodriguez, high approach. I'll take center and draw fire. They moved as one organism. Maria's fighter dove toward the Krell destroyer, weapons blazing. The Krell turned to track her exactly as she expected. Rodriguez came from above, targeting the bridge. Chen hit the engines from the side. The destroyer exploded in a ball of plasma that lit up the nebula for kilometers. Maria pulled her fighter through the debris field and kept moving. No time to celebrate. 50 more targets waited in the mist. The battle lasted for 6 hours. It was chaos. It was confusion. It was exactly the kind of warfare that humanity had perfected over 10,000 years of history. The Krell, for all their technology and experience, had never fought anything like this. They were lions being taken down by wolves, strong individually but vulnerable to coordinated pack tactics. When the Krell finally retreated, they left behind 700 destroyed or disabled ships. The Coalition had lost 90 vessels. The casualties were terrible on both sides, but the message was clear. The Grand Armada was not invincible. Vexthor stood in the command center of his ship, staring at the casualty reports with something that might have been respect. He had warned them. He had tried to make them understand that the humans were different. Now they knew. Now they had paid the price for their arrogance. The High Command contacted him directly. Huntmaster Vexthor, you are to assume command of the remaining fleet. Find a way to stop them. Vexthor looked at the elderly commanders on his screen. They were old, set in their ways, unable to adapt. That was the real weakness of the Krell. They had been successful for so long that they had forgotten how to change. I will do what must be done, he said. But he wondered if it was already too late. The Coalition did not stop with the Battle of the Veil Nebula. They pressed their advantage, striking at Krell supply lines, liberating occupied worlds, recruiting more survivors to their cause. Within 3 months, the tide of the war had turned completely. The hunters were being hunted across a dozen star systems. Sarah Chen led the fleet deeper into Krell territory. Every world they liberated revealed more horror. Entire species reduced to a few thousand survivors hiding in ruins, traumatized by decades of living in fear. The trophy halls on each world told the same story. The Krell had been doing this for 3,000 years. Hundreds of civilizations, millions of species, billions of individuals, all erased because the Krell believed might made right. But now the Coalition faced a difficult question. What to do with the Krell themselves? Sarah called a council meeting on the Defiance. Representatives from 20 species gathered in the war room. A Thessaran named Kevtran spoke first, his voice shaking with rage. They destroyed our world. Billions dead. Our culture, our history, everything turned to ash. Why are we even discussing this? We exterminate them the way they exterminated us. Complete extinction. Many voices agreed. Species after species stood and shared their losses. Children who would never be born. Art that would never be created. Songs that would never be sung. The Krell had stolen futures from entire civilizations. They deserved no mercy, but Maria Santos stood up. She was no longer just a village woman from the Amazon. She was a sergeant, a fighter pilot, a survivor. And she had killed more Krell than anyone else in the fleet. I want them dead, she said quietly. Every one of them. When I close my eyes, I see my village burning. I see my neighbors hunted like animals. I see my nephew, who was 7 years old, trying to hide behind me when they came. Her voice broke. He didn't make it. So yes, I want the Krell extinct. The room was silent. Everyone knew Maria's story. If anyone had earned the right to vengeance, it was her. But, she continued, if we exterminate them, what does that make us? We become what we hate. We become the next Krell. And 1,000 years from now, someone else will be hunting us because of what we did here. Is that the galaxy we want to build? A Chirac scientist clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. The human speaks wisdom. The cycle of violence must end somewhere. But how? The Krell culture is built on hunting, on dominance. They will never accept subordination. Then we change their culture, Sarah said. All eyes turned to her. The Krell believe they are apex predators. We've proven they're not, but we don't destroy them. We redirect them. The galaxy has plenty of real threats. Pirates, rogue AI, void predators in deep space. We turn the Krell into protectors instead of hunters. We give them a purpose that doesn't involve exterminating innocent species. They will never agree, Kevtran said bitterly. They'll agree, General Webb said from the communication screen, because the alternative is extinction. We can offer them a choice. Join the Coalition and protect the galaxy, or face the same fate they gave to 200 other species. Pride or survival, let's see which they choose. The Coalition fleet arrived at Krell Prime, the homeworld of the species that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 millennia. It was a harsh world covered in mountains and deep valleys. The Krell had evolved as ambush predators here, waiting in the rocks for prey to pass below. It explained everything about their culture. They were patient hunters used to waiting, striking from advantage, taking trophies, but they had never learned what to do when the prey fought back. Sarah Chen stood in a landing shuttle as it descended toward the planetary capital. Beside her stood Vexthor. He was her prisoner, but also her guest. He had agreed to help negotiate the surrender of his people, not because he wanted to, but because he understood that his species faced a choice between evolution and extinction. "Your kind should hate me," Vexthor said as the shuttle approached the landing pad. "I led the hunt on your world. I killed your people. I do hate you," Sarah said honestly, "but I hate what you did, not what you are. You followed the culture you were raised in. You believed what you were taught. That doesn't excuse it, but it means you can change. The question is, will you?" The Krell High Command waited in the great hall of their capital. They were old warriors, covered in scars, surrounded by trophies from 1,000 hunts. They looked at Sarah with a mixture of fury and fear, a human, weak, soft prey, standing before them as a conqueror. Sarah did not waste time with pleasantries. "The war's over, you lost. The question now is what happens next. We can exterminate you. Many in my coalition want that. They've earned that right through the suffering you caused. Or we can offer you an alternative." "Slavery," spat one of the commanders. "Integration," Sarah corrected. "You join the Galactic Union we're building. You surrender your fleet, your weapons, your territory. You accept observers and restrictions, and in return you get to survive. Your children get to grow up. Your species gets a future."